I always thought I was the kind of person who couldn't get lost. I prided myself on my sense of direction, the way I could read a map upside down or find my way back to a campsite in the dark. My friends joked that I had a built-in compass, and I believed them. Maybe that's why, when I took that wrong turn, I didn't panic. Not at first. It was supposed to be a simple drive. I was heading to my cousin's wedding, a 2-hour trip through the back roads of rural Pennsylvania. I'd made the drive before, but this time, I decided to take the scenic route. The GPS said it would only add 15 minutes, and I figured I'd get to see some of the old mining towns and rolling hills that dotted the countryside. I left early, coffee in hand, music playing low, the sun just starting to burn off the morning fog. The first hour was uneventful. I passed through sleepy towns with names like Millersville and Pine Hollow, their main streets lined with shuttered shops and faded American flags. The roads twisted and dipped, sometimes narrowing to a single lane as they wound through dense woods. I was alone for long stretches, the only car on the road, but I didn't mind. I liked the solitude, the way the world seemed to shrink to just me and the hum of the engine. It was just after 9 when I saw the detour sign. Road closed. It read in blocky orange letters. Detour ahead. I slowed, squinting at the map on my phone. The GPS rerouted me, sending me down a side road I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment, but there was no other way through. I turned right, the tires crunching over gravel, and followed the new route. The road narrowed quickly, the trees pressing in on either side. The sunlight flickered through the branches, casting strange, shifting shadows across the hood of my car. I glanced at the GPS again. The blue line snaked ahead, but the names of the roads were unfamiliar. I told myself it was fine. I'd be back on the main highway soon enough. But the road kept twisting, and the trees grew thicker. The air felt heavier, somehow, as if I'd driven into a different season. The temperature dropped, and I shivered, reaching for the heater. The radio crackled, then went silent, the signal lost in the hills. I tried to call my cousin, but there was no service. I told myself not to worry. I'd be out of the woods soon. That's when I saw the sign. It was old, the paint peeling, the letters barely legible. Welcome to Graywood. Population 1,204. The sign leaned at an odd angle, half swallowed by weeds. I frowned. I didn't remember seeing Graywood on the map. I slowed, peering through the windshield. The road ahead was empty, the trees thinning to reveal a cluster of houses in the distance that I should have turned around. I should have trusted the knot of unease tightening in my stomach. But I told myself it was just a shortcut, a forgotten town bypassed by the highway. I kept driving. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Even with the windows up, I could tell something was off. There were no birds, no distant hum of lawnmowers or barking dogs. The houses looked normal enough, 2-story colonials, a few ranches, all with neat lawns and tidy porches, but there were no cars in the driveways, no people on the sidewalks. Curtains hung in the windows, but I couldn't see anyone inside. I slowed to a crawl, my tires whispering over the cracked pavement. The main street was lined with shops, a bakery, a hardware store, a barber with a spinning red and white pole. The signs were faded, the windows dusty. I saw a playground, the swings creaking in the breeze, but no children. The only movement was a stray cat darting across the road, its fur bristling as it vanished into the shadows. I pulled over in front of the bakery, my heart thumping. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe it was just early. Maybe everyone was at work or school. But the silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, that I got out of the car, the door slamming louder than I intended. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and something else, something sweet and rotten. I walked up to the bakery, peering through the glass. The shelves were empty, the lights off. A bell hung above the door, unmoving. I tried the handle. It was locked. I moved down the street, checking the other shops. All locked. All empty. I called out, my voice echoing off the brick facades. Hello? Is anyone here? No answer. I was about to give up when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone drumming their fingers on a table. I followed the sound to the hardware store. The door was locked, but the blinds were open just enough for me to see inside. An old man sat behind the counter, his head bowed, his hands moving in a slow, steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I knocked on the glass. He didn't look up. I knocked again, harder. Nothing. I tried the door one more time, rattling the handle. The man's head jerked up, and for a moment, I thought he was looking right at me. But his eyes were unfocused, staring through me. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I backed away, my skin crawling. I hurried back to my car, fumbling with the keys. The engine started on the first try, but the radio was still dead. I checked my phone. No service. I put the car in gear and drove, faster this time, my hands tied on the wheel. The road out of town was narrower than I remembered. The trees pressed in, their branches scraping against the roof. I drove for what felt like miles, but the road just kept winding, looping back on itself. I passed the same cluster of houses, the same leaning sign. Welcome to Graywood. I slammed on the brakes, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I checked the map again, but the GPS was frozen, the blue line spinning in place. I tried to retrace my route, turning left where I'd turned right, but every road led me back to the same spot. I was trapped. I parked in front of the playground, my hands shaking. I tried to calm myself, to think logically. Maybe I'd missed a turn. Maybe the GPS was just glitching. I decided to walk, to see if I could find someone, anyone, who could help. The playground was empty, the swings swaying in the breeze. I sat on a bench, my mind racing. I thought about my cousin, about the wedding I was supposed to be at, about the world outside this silent, empty town. I tried to remember the last time I'd seen another car, another person. It felt like hours ago that I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, my heart leaping. A woman stood at the edge of the playground, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her dress old-fashioned, like something out of a black and white movie. She watched me with a strange, distant expression. "Excuse me," I called, standing up. "I'm lost. Can you help me?" She didn't answer. She just stared, her eyes wide and unblinking. I took a step toward her, but she backed away, disappearing behind a row of hedges that I followed, calling out again. "Please, I just need directions. I'm trying to get to the highway." I rounded the corner, but she was gone. The street was empty. I wandered for what felt like hours, my sense of direction slipping away. Every street looked the same. Neat houses, empty porches, curtains drawn tight. I saw the same old man in the hardware store, still tapping, still muttering to himself. I saw the woman again, standing in a window, her face pale and expressionless. I tried every road out of town, but they all looped back, leading me past the same landmarks. The sun never seemed to move, hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows that never changed. That I started to notice other things, too. The clocks in the shop windows were all stopped at 9:17. The newspapers in the stands were dated July 12, 1974. The cars parked along the street were old, their paint faded, their tires flat. I found a payphone outside the post office. I picked up the receiver, but there was no dial tone. I tried dialing 911, but the line was dead. That I sat on the curb, my head in my hands. I was starting to feel desperate, the edges of panic creeping in. I thought about breaking into one of the houses, about searching for a phone or a map or anything that could help me. But something held me back, a sense that I was being watched, that the town itself was waiting for me to make a mistake. That I decided to try one more time. I walked back to my car, determined to drive until I ran out of gas if I had to. I started the engine, the sound echoing in the empty street. I took a deep breath, Gripping the wheel. As I pulled away, I saw movement in my rearview mirror. The woman was standing in the middle of the road, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes fixed on me. I pressed the gas, speeding past her, not daring to look back. The road twisted and turned, the trees closing in. I drove faster, the speedometer climbing. The houses blurred past, the sign flashing by again and again. "Welcome to Graywood." I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop. I was back where I started. I screamed, pounding the steering wheel. I was trapped, caught in a loop I couldn't escape. I got out of the car, stumbling into the street. The silence was deafening. I shouted, my voice echoing off the empty buildings. "Let me out. Please, just let me out." There was no answer. I wandered the streets, my mind unraveling. I saw the old man again, his tapping growing louder, more frantic. I saw the woman, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes hollow. I started to notice other figures, too. Children on the playground, their faces blank, their movements slow and mechanical. A man mowing his lawn, the mower silent, the grass uncut. A dog barking soundlessly at a mailman who never moved. I realized, with a sickening jolt, that none of them were real. They were like mannequins, frozen in place, repeating the same motions over and over. I ran, my footsteps echoing in the empty streets. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out. I collapsed on the sidewalk, gasping for air. That's when I heard the music. It was faint at first, a distant melody drifting on the breeze. I sat up, listening. The sound grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from the center of town. I followed the music, my heart pounding. I turned a corner and saw a crowd gathered in the town square. They stood in a circle, their faces turned toward a small stage. On the stage, a band played, their instruments gleaming in the sunlight. I approached, my footsteps slowing. The crowd parted as I drew near, their eyes following me. I felt a chill run down my spine. The band played on, their faces blank, their movements mechanical. The music was beautiful, haunting, but there was something wrong about it, something off-key, discordant. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The crowd watched, silent and unmoving. The music reached a crescendo, the notes twisting and warping. The band stopped, their instruments falling silent. The crowd turned to face me, their eyes emptied. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I turned and ran, the silence closing in behind me. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I locked the doors, my hands shaking. I stared at the dashboard, willing the GPS to work, the phone to ring, the radio to play. Nothing. I sat there, trapped in the silence, the town pressing in on all sides. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the empty street through the windshield. The world outside seemed frozen, as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. I tried to focus, to think rationally, but my thoughts kept circling back to the same questions. Where was I? How had I gotten here? And, most importantly, how was I going to get out? I forced myself to take slow, deep breaths. I told myself that panic wouldn't help, that there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I'd had a seizure behind the wheel, or maybe I was dreaming or hallucinating from lack of sleep. But everything felt too real. The rough texture of the steering wheel beneath my fingers, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the cup holder, the ache in my legs from running. I decided to try the houses. Maybe, just maybe, one of them would have a working phone, or a person who could help. I got out of the car, the door creaking in the silence, and walked up the nearest driveway. The house was a two-story colonial, its white paint peeling, the porch swaying gently in the breeze. I knocked on the door, my knuckles rapping against the wood. No answer. I tried the handle. To my surprise, it turned easily. The door swung open with a soft groan. "Hello?" I called, stepping inside. "Is anyone here?" The house was dim, the curtains drawn tight. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of something floral, potpourri, maybe, or old perfume. I moved through the foyer, my footsteps muffled by the threadbare carpet. The living room was neat, almost obsessively so. Magazines were stacked on the coffee table, a vase of wilted flowers sat on the mantel, and family photos lined the walls. I paused, studying the faces in the pictures. They were all smiling, frozen in time, but their eyes seemed wrong, too dark, too empty. I moved into the kitchen. The sink was full of dishes, the counters cluttered with unopened mail and grocery lists. A calendar hung on the wall, the days marked off in neat red X's. The last date circled was July 12th, 1974. I felt a chill run down my spine. That was the same date as the newspapers I'd seen outside. That I opened the fridge, half expecting to find it empty. Instead, it was full, milk, eggs, butter, all perfectly arranged. I reached for the milk, unscrewing the cap. It smelled fresh. I poured a little into a glass and took a cautious sip. It tasted normal. I set the glass down, my hands trembling. I didn't know what to make of it. Everything in the house seemed frozen in time, as if the family had just stepped out for a moment and never returned. That I moved upstairs, the steps creaking beneath my weight. The hallway was lined with more photos, more smiling faces. I opened the first door on the left, a child's room, the bed neatly made, toys arranged on the shelves. A mobile hung above the crib, spinning slowly in the still air. I closed the door, my heart pounding. I tried the next room, a bathroom, spotless, the mirror fogged with age. I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass, my face pale and drawn, my eyes wide with fear. The last door was locked. I rattled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I pressed my ear to the wood, listening. For a moment, I thought I heard something, a faint whisper, a shuffling sound. But when I knocked, there was only silence. I hurried back downstairs, my nerves frayed. I stepped out onto the porch, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The street was still empty, the silence unbroken. That I tried the next house, and the next, but they were all the same, empty, frozen, untouched by time. In one, I found a table set for dinner, plates and silverware gleaming in the dim light. In another, a television flickered with static, the screen casting ghostly shadows on the walls. That I started to feel like I was being watched. Every time I turned a corner, I caught glimpses of movement, shadows flitting behind curtains, faces peering from darkened windows. But whenever I tried to get closer, they vanished. I wandered the streets, my sense of time slipping away. The sun never seemed to move, hanging low in the sky, casting the same long shadows. My phone was still dead, the GPS frozen, the radio silent. I found myself back at the town square, the bandstand empty now, the crowd gone. I sat on a bench, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of it all. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. That I turned, expecting to see the woman from before. Instead, it was a boy, maybe 10 or 11, his hair neatly combed, his clothes old-fashioned. He watched me with wide, solemn eyes. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, I took a wrong turn. I'm trying to get to the highway, but I can't seem to find my way out." The boy nodded, as if he'd heard this before. "Nobody leaves Graywood," he said softly. I felt a chill run through me. "What do you mean?" He looked down, scuffing his shoe against the pavement. "They all try, but the town doesn't let them go." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Is there someone I can talk to? The police, the mayor, anyone?" He shook his head. "They're all gone. It's just us now." I tried to keep my voice steady. "What about your family? Where are they?" He looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "They're here, but they're not the same anymore." I didn't know what to say. I reached out, but he flinched away, backing into the shadows. "Wait," I called. but he was already gone, swallowed by the silence. I sat there for a long time, the boy's words echoing in my mind. Nobody leaves Greywood. I decided to try the outskirts of town again. Maybe there was a road I'd missed, a path through the woods. I walked for what felt like miles, the houses thinning, the trees growing thicker. The air grew colder, the light dimmer that I found a dirt path leading into the woods. I followed it, my footsteps crunching over dead leaves. The trees closed in, their branches arching overhead, blocking out the sun. The path twisted and turned, the undergrowth growing thicker. I heard something moving in the shadows, a rustling, a low whisper. I stopped, my heart pounding. I called out, but there was no answer. I kept walking, the path growing narrower. The trees pressed in, their trunks gnarled and twisted. I felt like I was being watched, like something was following me just out of sight. That I broke into a run, branches whipping at my face, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I stumbled, falling to my knees. When I looked up, I saw a clearing ahead. In the center of the clearing stood a house, old, weathered, its windows dark. Smoke curled from the chimney, the only sign of life I'd seen all day. I approached cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the mossy ground. I knocked on the door, my hand trembling. The door creaked open, and an old woman peered out. Her hair was white, her face lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "Lost, are you?" she said, her voice raspy. I nodded, swallowing hard. "I took a wrong turn. I can't find my way out of town." She studied me for a moment, then stepped aside, motioning me in. "Come in, then. No sense standing out there." I hesitated, but the cold drove me inside. The house was warm, the air thick with the scent of herbs and wood smoke. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The woman gestured to a chair by the fire. I sat, my hands shaking. She poured me a cup of tea, her movements slow and deliberate. "You're not the first to find yourself here," she said, settling into a rocking chair across from me. I sipped the tea, the warmth soothing my nerves. "What is this place?" I asked. "Why can't I leave?" She rocked slowly, her eyes fixed on the fire. Greywood is a place between places, a crossroads of sorts. People come here when they're lost, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident. But once you're here, it's hard to find your way out. I frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "Is there a way out?" She nodded, her gaze distant. "There's always a way, but it's not easy. The town doesn't like to let go." I set the cup down, my hands trembling. "What do I have to do?" She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You have to remember who you are, why you came here. Only then will the road open." I stared at her, my mind racing. "I just took a wrong turn. That's all." She shook her head. "Nobody comes to Greywood by accident." I wanted to argue, to insist that she was wrong, but something in her eyes stopped me. I thought about the last few weeks, about the stress at work, the fights with my family, the feeling that I was drifting, unmoored. I thought about the wedding, about how I'd almost called to say I wasn't coming. I looked down, my throat tight. "I don't know who I am anymore," I whispered. The woman reached out, her hand warm and steady. "Then that's where you start." We sat in silence, the fire crackling between us. I felt a strange sense of peace, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. After a while, the woman stood, moving to the window. She peered out, her eyes narrowing. "It's getting late," she said. "You should rest. Tomorrow, you'll try again." I nodded, too tired to argue. She led me to a small bedroom, the bed neatly made, the sheets crisp and clean. I lay down, my mind swirling with questions. I listened to the wind rattling the windows, the distant sound of music drifting through the trees. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since I'd arrived in Greywood, I slept. When I woke, the house was silent. The fire had burned low, the air cold. I got up, moving through the rooms, but the old woman was gone. I stepped outside, blinking in the pale morning light. The woods were quiet, the path leading back to town clear and straight. I followed it, my footsteps steady. The town looked different in the morning, brighter, somehow less menacing. The houses still stood empty, the streets still silent, but the sense of dread had lifted. I walked to the town square, the bandstand empty, the benches deserted. I sat, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. I thought about what the woman had said, about remembering who I was, about finding my way out. I tried to focus, to recall the person I'd been before I took that wrong turn. I thought about my family, about my friends, about the life I'd left behind. I thought about the choices I'd made, the regrets I carried. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. When I opened them, I saw the boy from before, standing at the edge of the square. "Did you remember?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded, a tear slipping down my cheek. "I think so." He smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Then maybe it's time to go." I stood, my heart pounding. I walked to my car, the keys cold in my hand. I started the engine, the sound loud in the quiet morning. I pulled onto the main road, the houses blurring past. The sign flashed by, "Welcome to Graywood." But this time, the road didn't loop back. It stretched ahead, straight and true, the trees parting to reveal the highway in the distance. I drove, the sun rising behind me, the town fading in the rearview mirror. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I drove away from Graywood and never looked back, that the world made sense again, and the strange, haunted silence of that place faded into nothing more than a bad memory. But the truth is, some places never really let you go. They linger, like a shadow at the edge of your vision, a chill in the air on a warm day, a song you can't quite remember but can't forget either. The highway felt almost unreal after the endless loops and silent streets of Graywood. Cars sped past, their drivers oblivious to the strange little town hidden just a few miles away. I watched the signs for familiar towns, Millersville, Pine Hollow, flash by, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel, dreamed it all in the space between two heartbeats. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw the road behind me twist and shimmer, the trees bending in a way that made my stomach lurch. For a split second, I thought I saw the old woman standing at the edge of the woods, her white hair blowing in the wind, her eyes fixed on me. Then she was gone, and the road was just a road again. I drove in silence, the radio still dead, my phone still showing no service. It wasn't until I reached the outskirts of the next town that the signal bars flickered back to life, the familiar ping of notifications breaking the spell. I pulled over, my hands shaking, and checked my messages. There were dozens, missed calls from my cousin, frantic texts from my parents, even a voicemail from my boss asking if I was all right. I called my cousin first, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what had happened. I told her I'd gotten lost, that I'd ended up in a town that wasn't on any map, that I'd spent the night there. She laughed, a little too loudly, and told me not to worry, that everyone gets turned around in those back roads sometimes. I didn't argue. I just promised I'd be there soon. The wedding was already in full swing by the time I arrived. My family hugged me, my cousin handed me a drink, and for a while, I let myself get swept up in the music and laughter. But every so often, I'd catch myself glancing at the door, half expecting to see the boy from Graywood, or the woman with the tight bun, or the old man tapping his fingers on the counter. That night, after the party had died down and the guests had gone home, I sat on the porch, staring up at the stars. The world felt different, sharper, somehow, as if I'd stepped out of a dream and into a reality that didn't quite fit. I thought about the old woman's words. You have to remember who you are, why you came here. Only then will the road open. I wondered if that was true for everyone, or just for me. The days passed, and life returned to something like normal. I went back to work, caught up on emails, tried to forget the feeling of being watched. But Greywood lingered, a splinter in my mind. I found myself searching for it on maps, scrolling through satellite images, looking for any sign of the town. But it was never there. The roads twisted and turned, but none of them led to Greywood. That I tried to talk to people about it, my friends, my family, but they just laughed, or changed the subject, or looked at me with concern. I stopped bringing it up after a while. It was easier to pretend it had never happened. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wake from a dream of endless streets and silent houses, my heart pounding, the taste of wood smoke on my tongue. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows, and wonder if I'd ever really left. One evening, a few weeks after the wedding, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause, then a familiar voice, soft, hesitant. "Did you remember?" It was the boy from Greywood. I sat up, my heart racing. "How did you get this number?" He didn't answer. "You have to help them," he said. "They're still there. They can't leave." I swallowed, my mouth dry. Who? Who can't leave? The others. The ones who forgot. The ones who never remembered. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking. I tried to call the number back, but it went straight to voicemail, a generic, robotic message. I left a message anyway, my words tumbling out in a rush. "Who are you? What do you want from me? How do I help them?" There was no answer. That night, I dreamed of Greywood. I walked the empty streets, the houses looming on either side, the sun frozen in the sky. I saw the old man in the hardware store, his fingers tapping out a frantic rhythm. I saw the woman in the window, her eyes hollow and pleading. I saw the children on the playground, their faces blank, their movements slow and mechanical. That I tried to speak to them, to ask what they needed, but my voice was lost in the silence. I wandered the streets, searching for a way out, but every road led me back to the town square, to the bandstand, to the empty benches. When I woke, my pillow was damp with sweat, my heart racing. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Greywood was still out there, that the people trapped inside were still waiting, still hoping for someone to remember them. I started to research. I spent hours online, searching for any mention of Greywood, old newspaper articles, missing persons reports, urban legends. I found stories, scattered and fragmented, about a town that appeared and disappeared, about travelers who vanished without a trace, about roads that looped back on themselves. Most people dismissed them as ghost stories, campfire tales. But I knew better. I found a forum dedicated to strange places, liminal spaces, they called them. I posted my story, half expecting to be mocked or ignored. But within hours, I had dozens of replies. Some were jokes, some were sympathetic, but a few stood out. People who claimed to have seen Greywood or places like it. They described the same looping roads, the same silent streets, the same sense of being watched. One message caught my eye. It was from a user named Lost in the Woods. "I know Greywood," they wrote. "I escaped once, but I think part of me is still there. If you want to help them, you have to go back." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Go back. The thought filled me with dread, but also with a strange sense of responsibility. If there was even a chance I could help the people trapped in Greywood, didn't I have to try? I spent the next few days preparing. I packed a bag, food, water, a flashlight, a notebook, a map. I left a note for my family, telling them I was going camping for a few days, that I needed some time to clear my head. I didn't tell them the truth. I wasn't sure they'd believe me. I drove back to the place where I'd taken the wrong turn, my heart pounding with every mile. The road looked the same, narrow, winding, the trees pressing in on either side. I slowed as I approached the spot where the detour sign had been, But it was gone now. The road open and empty that I hesitated, my hands gripping the wheel. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to risk getting trapped again? But the memory of the boy's voice, of the people trapped in that endless loop, pushed me forward. I turned onto the side road, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. The trees closed in, the sunlight flickering through the branches. The air grew colder, heavier. The radio crackled, then went silent that I drove for what felt like hours, the road twisting and turning, the woods growing thicker. I checked the GPS, but the blue line spun in place, the map blank. Then, just as before, I saw the sign. Welcome to Graywood. Population 1,204. I pulled over, my hands shaking. I got out of the car, the silence pressing in on all sides. The town looked the same, empty streets, neat houses, faded signs. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I walked down the main street, past the bakery, the hardware store, the playground. I called out, my voice steady. I'm here to help. I remember you. At first, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the town began to stir. The old man in the hardware store looked up, his eyes clearing. The woman in the window smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. The children on the playground laughed, their faces brightening. I walked to the town square, the bandstand empty, the benches deserted. I sat, waiting. The boy appeared, his hair neatly combed, his eyes shining. You came back, he said, his voice full of wonder. I nodded, my throat tight. I couldn't forget. He smiled, a real, genuine smile. Then maybe it's time for all of us to go. The townspeople gathered, their faces hopeful, their eyes bright. The sun climbed higher in the sky, the shadows shrinking. I stood, my heart pounding. I walked to my car, the keys warm in my hand. I started the engine, the sound loud in the quiet morning. This time, when I pulled onto the main road, the houses didn't blur past. The sign flashed by, welcome to Graywood, but the road stretched ahead, straight and true, the trees parting to reveal the highway in the distance. I drove, the sun rising behind me, the town fading in the rearview mirrored as I left Graywood behind. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The world seemed brighter, sharper, more real. I knew I'd never forget the town or the people trapped inside, but I also knew that I'd help them, in some small way, by remembering. Sometimes, when I'm driving alone on a quiet road, I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a flash of white hair, a boy's solemn face, a sign half swallowed by weeds. I smile, knowing that Graywood is still out there, waiting for the next lost soul to find their way. But I also know that, this time, I won't be afraid. Because I remember,